On this episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, you are getting a Petrolhead's take on a Tesla Model 3. And no, I'm not going to talk about panel gap for 20 minutes. Okay, Tesla Model 3. Let's turn it on. I guess it's on. Put it in drive. Whee! Welcome everyone to a very special episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. Very special because this is my first electric car review, which I am super pumped about. Now, everyone has heard of the Model 3 at some point, but I've never really looked at the Model 3 as like a car for me. When it came out, I was intrigued, $35,000 price tag for an entry-level one and, pretty decent electric range and all that stuff. But I've never really looked at them as a replacement for my petrol cars. I really like burning dinosaur juice. That's what we're going to find out today, now that I'm actually get to drive one. Was that a right call, never really shopping for one, or not? So today you're going to get a Petrolhead's take on a Tesla Model 3. I don't have a lot of background on these cars. I haven't done a lot of research. I know a little bit about them, but you're just going to get like an unadulterated review of what a Model 3 is like. And before we get going, huge thanks to Aaron for letting me borrow this car. I'm going to put some links in the description below. Aaron is in the Cincinnati area and he rents this car out on Turo. And he's actually going to give $100 off to the first 10 people who rent from him. So check the description for details. Now, on to the review. So as I've already kind of done in the intro, there's really no on, it's just on. You walk up if the app's tied to your phone, put it in drive with this little stalk here, and drive away. While we're talking about this stalk, I think Tesla has done a very good job of making this interior very minimalist. There's not a lot going on. You have two what look like turn signals on either side. One that controls like forward, reverse, and park. One that controls turn signals, your wipers and stuff like that. And then two knobs on the steering wheel, which are just like volume, I think. And then a massive screen. And once again, I think it works very well. I like the minimalist aspect of it. And it sort of just kind of rolls with the whole ethos of the Tesla, in that it's just a very simple, modern design. All right, let me come to a stop here because I want to show you guys one thing. I'm going to come to a stop here, take my foot off the brake and the accelerator, and we're not going anywhere. Like, it doesn't creep. And by creep, I mean, you know how in most automatic cars, if you are stopped, you take your foot off the brake, it kind of just like moves forward a little bit. It doesn't do that, except it sort of does, because you can modify that in the settings. And that's kind of like leads me to my next point in the Tesla here. There's like a million settings that you can modify in this car. You can adjust the creep. You can adjust the braking regen, like how much when I lift off throttle, how much it uses the motor to slow the car down and regenerate some of the electricity. Also, you can modify the throttle response, the steering response. Like, there's a million things you can modify. And because of that, it sort of gives it more of like a gadget feeling. It almost feels like this is like it's like getting a new phone instead of getting a new car. I just kind of want to play with all the buttons and press all the little doodads as opposed to really drive it. Now, I just mentioned braking regen, and the braking regen, there's once again multiple settings for that, but the lightest setting, it's actually fairly aggressive with the braking. You could more or less drive this car with one foot if you plan things out well enough. On the higher setting, you could definitely drive this car with one foot, which takes a lot of getting used to. Now, once again, braking regen, you recoup some energy cost of getting the car going. I almost hit a chipmunk because he didn't hear me coming. So you regenerate some energy that you lost accelerating. You also are saving on brakes. Overall, it's like a really awesome thing once you get used to it. It definitely takes some getting used to, though, because if you're used to driving a car that's an automatic that just kind of coasts, anytime you let off the throttle, it's it just takes more finesse to it, basically. Now, as we talk about all the little doodads and whatnot, we should certainly talk about this stereo, because wow, like, it is really, really good. This is probably one of the best stereos I've heard at any level of car. I've had a Bang & Olufsen in a Audi S4, which was probably one of the better ones. I think this is even better. And, you know, there's probably multiple aspects of that. Like, I think part of it is because it's an electric car and it's so silent, so you get like really a lot of clarity in the stereo. But I also do think that it's just like generally a very good stereo, that if you put this stereo in like really any car, it would be really quite good. One of the problems with the whole silence thing of an electric car is that you do hear everything, which is good and bad. Obviously, it's a nice kind of cerebral, very chill experience as I drive this along. But there are some like rattles going on, which I didn't expect. There's like definitely one coming from the back somewhere. There's definitely one coming from under what I'll call the dash, even though it's not really a dash. So there's a couple rattles. It doesn't feel like, you know, a German car would feel. As we sort of further talk about the technology here, there's no traditional gauge cluster. Like, every car has a gauge cluster, right? Not this one. There's only just the tablet. So on the tablet, you get your miles per hour, so it's a little bit off center, which at first I wasn't super happy about, but it's fine. It's not a big deal because they post it at the top left of the tablet, so it's closest to the center of the car. It's not too bad. And I certainly like this huge screen for all the navigation features. I mean, the screen is huge, and it's so nice to just have it right here. I'm never tempted to be on my phone looking for navigation or anything like that. The clarity of the screen is wonderful. I mean, I have satellite on and I could basically see my house right now. Everything in this car just really makes sense to me. Like, it just feels very intuitive, and it seems like they just went through and said, okay, like, logically, what makes the most sense to do? Everything is super easy. There's a small menu down here where I can control the features I need to get to easily. You don't have to be super tech savvy to use it. And just, you know, little things like if you have the phone tied, or if you have the car tied to your phone and you use that as a key, which is pretty cool, when you walk away from the car, it will automatically lock because of proximity. And to give you a visual reference, it will fold the mirrors to let you know that the car is locked. And I think that's just like a really cool little detail that you don't see very often. Once again, they just kind of have done, they've taken the car and they've said, okay, what works, what doesn't, and we can improve upon this, like with simple little things. And I really, really like that. Now, one thing that I'm really liking as I've commuted with this car for a couple days is I come from a Mustang GT350, which is not a slow car, and I can get in any little, you know, spot or lane I need to in a commute, you know, if I need to change lanes or move quickly. But it draws a lot of attention because it's loud, and, you know, I often have to downshift, stuff like that. But in this car, foot down and just go. Like, you are instantly in that spot. It is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful little commuting car. And outside of obviously just the acceleration being fun, if you're not used to a quicker accelerating car, it gives you all those benefits of acceleration with also being great at commuting, just like I said, just darting into spots. Couple that with the quick steering, so we could talk about the dynamics a little bit. I am going to have my next review is going to cover a Model 3 Performance, so that's the dual motor fast one. So I'll talk a little bit more of dynamics with that car, but we can touch on it briefly here because I think it's important. And I will say that the steering is really, really good. I prefer the steering in comfort over all the other modes. The turn-in is very, very sharp. It's extremely precise, very sharp and quick. And as you would fully expect, there's really not a lot of feel coming through the wheel. It's pretty par for the course for electric power steerings of these days, and I mean, what else would you expect from an electric car? But overall, I really like the ride. It is a little jarring over bigger bumps. This has, you know, massive wheels on it, and it is a little more, I'll say, sporty feeling. Kind of reminds me more of a BMW than any sort of typical commuter car. So that is one thing to keep in mind if you just wanted to buy one of these and you're kind of more focused on comfort. It's by no means harsh, but it is definitely a little stiffer than, a Camry would be or something like that. Now, even though this isn't the performance model, I do want to talk about the acceleration of this thing. It's quick. This car is the definition of quick, and quick cars are ones that sort of get up and go in a hurry, and that's everything this does. You get that instant torque from that motor, but it definitely tapers off. It's not very fast once you're moving. Like that 0 to like 30 miles an hour or whatever it is insane. Honestly, maybe not insane, but it is extremely quick for what you would call the regular model of a car. Now, one thing I definitely want to talk about is Autopilot. And really, the road I'm on now is a perfect application for Autopilot. It's a highway, there's very low traffic, and all I have to do is press this stalk down twice, and it takes over. Now, I'm supposed to keep my hands on the wheel, which is a good idea, as it reminds me here. But let's talk about Autopilot, because I have a lot to say when it comes to Autopilot. I'm gonna reduce my speed a little bit here, just with the touch of this screen. And it's obviously going to, pace any cars in front of me that I catch up that are going slower. In this mode, it will even change lanes to pass them depending on my speed. I mean, it's pretty impressive for this, once again, this specific kind of driving. Long distances, in my opinion, long distances, low traffic. I say that because I've driven this thing for a couple days now and commuted with it, and I was just very curious how it would behave in typical high congestion highway commuting. And it's a little bit scary, if I'm honest, just because it's sort of unpredictable, and the biggest problem is people. People are the biggest problem. Now, once all these cars go autonomous, there will be no issue because they will be communicating with each other. They know what the other cars are going to do. They know what this car is going to do. But until then, when you have human beings on the road and you have cars like this that are somewhat autonomous, you're going to have problems. So, for example, yesterday I was driving home, and part of my drive home, I'm on a highway exiting to another highway, and some moron was in that little triangle. You either go straight or you go off to the exit, and he was just in that little triangle. And the car, I was behind him quite a ways, and he was there just chilling, not moving at all. I'm coming up, the car automatically takes me on the exit, and the car freaked out, even though he was not moving, and he wasn't in my lane, but the car freaked out and slammed on the brakes all by itself, and I almost got rear-ended. So that's sort of one of those things that we need to talk about, is that basically the car doesn't behave how most humans would behave. So the person behind me can see this car is not moving. He's in this little triangle off the road. He's not really a huge threat. This person's just driving, not expecting me to slam on their brakes. I'm not trying to shit on this system because it is incredible. Like I said, most times, most scenarios, it's really good. I would be happy to have this for long trips. Absolutely ecstatic to have it for long trips. But it is not without faults. I've never driven in a car with Autopilot. I've never been the driver in a car with Autopilot. So this is my first experience. And I guess I expected a little bit more, but I really should have known. It's going to take some time for them to get this down. And once again, I think the biggest problem is just trying to interact with people, human beings on the road, as opposed to computers, because computers are predictable. You know what they're going to do. People are not. I've already talked about I have to have my hand on the wheel in order for it to not turn off Autopilot, because it wants you to be ready to react, which totally makes sense. I get it. But unfortunately, sometimes you have to have your hand on the wheel and it's exerting a force, say in a turn, and you're trying to keep your hand on the wheel, show it that you're still like kind of in control. But sometimes it's really easy to put just a little bit too much force on the wheel, at which point it cancels autopilot, and then all of a sudden you kind of freak out because the car stops driving itself, and then you're in control, and you're not ready for it. So once again, it's this whole like expectations versus like you're trying to figure out what the car's going to do in your mind. So this is kind of a sketchy situation, but it just did a good job of braking, so that's fine. But you're trying to figure out what the car's going to do in your mind, and then you're doing some translation of what you're going to do depending on what the car's going to do. So there's sort of these layers of abstraction, and it can almost be more daunting than just driving. Like it's almost more mentally tasking, once again, with more traffic around than just driving. And the last thing I'll say on it is this, that maybe you get used to it. Maybe it's just because I've only spent a couple days with this car, but sort of turning your brain on and off from this autopilot mode is very weird. And you can kind of catch yourself like, who's driving right now? So I'll use it on the highway for my highway portion of the commute, and then obviously when I get off the highway, they don't have the full autonomous driving yet, so I have to do the driving from there, from the highway to my house. And when you do that, you were sort of in this mode where you were just chilling, the car's taking control, doing everything, and then now you take over, and if you kind of daydream, you forget like if you should be driving or not. I know that sounds really weird, and maybe it's just me. Once again, I'm sure you probably get more used to this, but man, I just have found myself in these sort of weird lulls. So let's sort of sum up the Tesla Model 3. I'm really intrigued because it drives better than I expected. Okay, there's something in the road here. What's it gonna do? Woohoo! I don't know if it was gonna avoid that or not. It got too close. I was nervous. I think it was. The steering wheel started to move. There was a tire in the road, and I believe it was going to avoid it. It started to move the wheel, although it got very close. So good job, Autopilot. Anyways, back to it. As I sum up this car, I'm just in awe of the technology. I knew they were good, but I didn't really realize that the driving was as good as it was. The driving is fantastic. It has good dynamics. It's not inspiring by any means. Once again, the speed is nothing to write home about. Quick off the line. Steering is quick and fun. You know, if you're coming from sort of a regular car like a Camry, this thing would feel like a rocket ship. It would drive like a rocket ship. But you know, it doesn't have the finesse that some of these manufacturers that have been doing it for a long time have. Now, you know, the older BMWs kind of lost their way a little bit now, but you know, it's not quite there. I would totally use this car as a commuter car, and I feel like I am underselling the car because it's incredible, and I would consider using it as a commuter car. But the only reason I would use it as a commuter car is if I had a petrol car to drive on nice days, or you know, on weekends, just when I want to have some fun, because it doesn't have really any character to it. So in the end, I'm really happy this car exists, and I want more people to buy it. More people should buy it. It's better for the environment and all those things. I would consider buying it as a daily driver, although it is expensive for me to have as a daily driver. I'll be curious what the long-term reliability is of them and how much they hold their value and whatnot, because I'm all about picking up cars on the used market. But I guess the last thing I will say, as I sit in traffic and I put this thing in autopilot, this is wonderful. Low speed traffic where it just, you know, kind of paces cars in front of you and you don't have to worry about it. This is great. These cars are incredible, and I think my only concerns are the lasting qualities of what makes it fun when you first get it. Once again, goes back to just being like a new phone. You know, you get a new phone, you're all excited for all these new features, and then within a month, you're kind of used to it. And while the new features are nice, it doesn't really feel as special anymore. And I'm curious if that's what it's like with this car. not to take away from its ability and everything that it can do, but I don't think it has a very lasting quality like some performance petrol cars do. Now, it's not supposed to be performance-based. We will see when I review the performance model, so you guys are going to have to stay tuned to see if that car changes my mind. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Overall, I'm blown away by this car. I've really, really enjoyed my time with it. Check out Aaron's Turo. I'll put a link below. I think he also has a link for if you buy a car with his link, you can get like 5,000 free supercharger miles, which is pretty awesome. So check out that link below. Check me out on Instagram in between episodes if you would like, at Eat Sleep Drive TV. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Thanks for watching, guys. Whee! Going in reverse. I wonder if I could put Autopilot on in reverse. Where's my camera? There it is.